Let's get into Friday feedback for the week. You can always write to me, info@davidpakman.com. We'll feature Spotify comments, YouTube comments, TikTok comments, all sorts of different things, as well as emails and subreddit posts. We start with a comment from our TikTok from Addy. Addy says, America is done. He told us what he was going to do. He is isolating us from the world, and his cult still thinks he's their savior. Their hate for liberals is so strong that they vote to their own demise. Unbelievable. We are here. Listen, I don't know about America's done, but we are seeing interest in moving to the United States decline. We are seeing interest in moving out of the United States at its peak. And we're also seeing tourism significantly down. I personally know more people moving to other countries in the last 6 months and in the forthcoming 6 months than at any other point I can remember. This is not like Googling, how can I move to Canada? This is not Googling, what's the Portugal golden visa scheme? It's people who either have moved or like they have their house listed and they found an apartment, but they just haven't moved yet. Like no other time that I can remember. So America's done. I mean, listen, that's a big statement, and I don't think we can say that right now. But it is clear that this is significantly changing the level of interest that a lot of people have in coming to the United States, and it is making more people than I ever remember. And it's backed up by data about inquiries regarding, Irish passports and Italian passports as well from ancestors who lived there and these different programs. I've never seen a time like this. Also from TikTok, Azanaya says, stop blaming Trump. America's fall is inevitable. No nation will ever rule forever. One will rise and fall. Now it's America's turn to fall. So stop pointing fingers. That is the way the cookie crumbles, like you would say. There's two thoughts on this. I do think it's plausible that at some point cycles won't necessarily repeat themselves. And you often hear this statement made about how Rome also fell. And for a long time, nobody believed Rome could ever fall. But ultimately, Rome did fall. And it fell slowly enough that people didn't necessarily realize that it was happening. Sure, that's fine. And it's totally conceivable that we may be in a sort of slow motion fall of the United States as a global superpower. But it's also conceivable that over the last several hundred years, things have changed. And much the same way that, there are diseases people no longer die from, that there could be a change where the sort of default paradigm of the empire that always falls is different, or it no longer persists. But there is no question that there are significant concerns that this is part of the slow motion decline of the United States as a global superpower. Maybe empire is the wrong word, but global superpower. And that Trump is a bit player in it. It could have been anyone. It happens to be Trump. I happen to think Trump has much more to do with what's going on right now than maybe Azanaya is giving credit for. But one of the things that is common about history is that when you look back, things seemed so obvious, but at the time they really weren't. And the idea of the inevitability of history can make us confused when we look back about what was obvious at the time. I hope that's clear. Debbie says on Facebook, they said Poland will be next for Putin if he is not stopped. Well, and of course, as we now know, Putin did go, in a sense, into Poland with the drones. Listen, we can disagree reasonably, like gentlemen and ladies, right? We can disagree reasonably about Putin's intentions and ambitions. We can disagree about the history of, well, we can't disagree about the history, but we can disagree about what is right in terms of Ukrainian land based on history, right? Like there are reasonable disagreements about some regions of Ukraine or something like that. But from the beginning, going back to the Biden administration, when we started hearing and seeing reports that Russia's amassing troops at the Ukrainian border. If Russia gets Ukraine, they will have greater ambitions that go at least beyond Ukraine. All of that stuff has been shown to be true. And maybe like most importantly, the idea that Putin will be ready to negotiate, ready to deal, ready to wrap this thing up as soon as Trump is the one involved in the negotiation. We suspected that that wasn't true, and it very much is not true. Putin has seemed to have zero sense of urgency. Sanctions against Putin are always 2 weeks away, according to Trump. And so there are areas, I mean, like, you can have a different opinion. It's a matter of opinion whether the U.S. should support Ukraine. I happen to think that the U.S. should in the way that has been done without boots on the ground. Okay, but someone could disagree with me about that. But at this point, we have to recognize that all of the warnings we received over the last several years about what Russia was doing or planned to do, they've come true. And that should count for something when we think about how to interpret Trump's opinion of the matter, which has been primarily informed by things that he got completely wrong. All right, Ketoshin on Instagram says, I do not agree with a lot of things he do, but he is a hardworking president. Maybe we should give him a break. Ketoshin, I'm so sorry to pierce your bubble here. Trump is extraordinarily averse to work. Now, the fact that he doesn't sleep a lot and he's on his phone tweeting and putting out truth messages on Truth Social, that's really not working hard. You know, I'm reminded of one of my favorite podcasts is Cal Newport's podcast. And one of the things that Cal Newport talks about a lot is how in modern work environments, busyness and participation in unstructured communication, like responding to coworker emails quickly, responding quickly on Slack, these are seen as proxies to actual productivity, right? And so my main thing here is I need to record the show. That's the main thing. I could look very busy and hardworking by sitting on email, responding to everybody within 30 seconds all day. I would look very busy and you might say, oh, he's working so hard. But am I getting the show done? That's what really matters. And similarly with Donald Trump, he's up early, he's up late, he's tweeting, he's traveling, he's on the plane, he's going here for a rally there. How much actual work is Trump doing? And how much deep work is he doing? I would argue the amount of deep work is essentially zero. He doesn't seem capable or have the capacity of it. So Ketoshin, I think you got to rethink some of your terms here a little bit. Not making a lot of sense. All right, Rob CT30 on Instagram says, hope you're well, David. I know this has to hit a little close to home for you. I would never compare you to him, but you guys, referring to Charlie Kirk, share much of the same social spaces. Just stay safe, my friend, and keep up the good work. You know, what's really interesting about this is I have had, over the last week plus now, I have had so many conversations with some of the largest creators on the left. Everybody agrees there has never been a time like this. Now, what that means can mean different things. And the personal safety aspect of it obviously is important. I'm, of course, not going to reveal anything about any particular creator. But, you know, I think that it's important just to consider a lot of the creators you know, they don't even live remotely close to where you think they do. And oftentimes it's like, oh, a creator says like, I live in the Chicago area. And then it's like, they don't live in Chicago. They don't live in the Chicago suburbs. Maybe they're like over the border in Wisconsin. And it's like, no, they live in California. They live in the UK. They're not anywhere close. And so I think the point I'm making is this is a concern and a lot of creators are aware of it and are taking a number of different precautions. But this feels like a different time. Certainly feels like a different time than any that we've experienced. All right, let's look at Spotify. K-Man on Spotify says, I never paid that much attention to the news until I found these independent podcasts, and now I'm hooked. Keep it up. Yeah, you know, one of the things I think is really important about independent media is that when it comes to like cable news and CNN, there's a pie that is basically a fixed size, and arguably the pie is shrinking. And what I mean by that is, for the most part, people who are habitual watchers of MSNBC are watching a fixed amount of content, a fixed amount of news. And if they go from MSNBC to CNN, they're not going to just watch more stuff. They'll watch less MSNBC and more CNN. And sort of it's zero sum in that the networks are fighting for a share of an audience that is at best stable and at worst shrinking. What I think is so exciting and so important about our space is that the pie is getting bigger. And so sometimes people go, David, it used to be that the big players in your space were like you, the Young Turks, Majority Report, whatever. That was like 8-10 years ago. And now all of a sudden, it's like there's the big players, which are you, Midas Touch, Brian Tyler Cohen. And then there's like medium to large players, and there's people who are up and coming, and you've got Adam Mockler, and you've got Luke Beasley, and you've got all these different people. This must be bad for you because the audience is getting sliced and diced. Our audience is bigger today than it ever has been. And why is it? It's because when Luke Beasley and Adam Mockler start a channel, they don't take my audience. They pull more people into the independent space. And so the way I see it, and this is why I try to be collaborative with everybody, because we're not only improving the ecosystem, but we're getting more people exposed to alternative media. When Luke gets 1 million followers, that could mean 20, 30, 40,000 of his followers that now find me. And when Adam Mockler gets 1 million followers, now that's 20, 30, 40,000 people who could find Luke, and then 20, 30, 40,000 people that could find the David Pakman Show. And so the platform, the ecosystem is growing, and I just think it's so phenomenal. And this is why I think, we need to be working together to grow the ecosystem rather than doing like the infighting. The infighting really is probably the most toxic aspect of this space. All right, taking the road less traveled says on TikTok, when someone loses their job, they know it. When someone doesn't get a raise, they know it. When someone can't find a job, they know it. When they lose their home or farm, they know it. Can't lie your way out of those things. This goes to the idea that we learned during the Biden presidency. I can beat you over the head with facts up and down. I can say unemployment is historically low. Labor participation is high. Inflation has come down. But if you're sitting there at your kitchen table and you're looking at money in and money out and what things cost and what happens if I get a flat tire and need to spend $300, I've got to go into debt. I've got to charge it. I can't give you any statistics that will make you think things are going well. Joe Biden and eventually Kamala Harris suffered as a result of that. And subsequently, Donald Trump is suffering now. And I believe that the midterms will be a major referendum on what's going on in the economy. You can say a lot of things to people about foreign policy, about social issues, and it's sort of like down to a matter of opinion. But one of the things we've learned is telling people that everything's awesome economically doesn't really work if things aren't going well in their household. All right, Glorbox says, you're heading past a depression and into a full-on governmental collapse. Employment, healthcare, and food systems will crumble. The so-called elite will scatter with their wealth and leave the population to fend for themselves. I don't believe that it is this dire. I don't think it's this dystopian, sort of like day after tomorrow type scenario. But I do think that we are up against some real problems here. And one of the things I've been talking about this week is the importance of Democrats taking back the House. Not because I think every Democrat running for the House is, this exciting purveyor of the epitome of progressive ideals, but because taking back the House is the most reasonable bulwark against Trump's policy and ideas that we have right now. And so while I wouldn't go as hyperbolic with it as Glorbox does, I completely agree that things are going in a direction that has to be stopped. The special elections this year are part of it. The midterms next year, potentially the most consequential midterms I will have been a part of covering. Send me your opinion about what's going on. info@davidpakman.com, or leave a comment on the YouTube video, or leave a comment on Substack at substack.davidpakman.com. We'll see you on the bonus show. I'll be back Monday too.